Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of October. Today we have some updates, so let's start. Today the Russians, the second day in a row since Monday, are attacking and shelling Kiev in Ukraine with drones, with missiles, with rockets, with everything they have. Mainly the Russians were targeting today the energy facilities as they did it yesterday and the day before. If we take a look at the Russian sources map, today we have a lot of icons, new icons on this map, and first updates were received from the town by the name of Zhytomyr, this one. This town is located on the west from Kiev, and this is a very important area because using this area, the western nuclear power plants are connected with Kiev through this town, Zhytomyr. If you take a look at this map in zoom mode, you're going to see that the Russians destroyed another energy facilities in this area. As far as I understand, they destroyed 330 kilovolts lines. If we're talking about Kiev, the Russians attacked the east-north part of Kiev, and they attacked the power plant number 6 in this area, and the east and northeast areas of Kiev are supplied by the energy from this power plant. I have some friends from Kiev from this area. They reported that during the day they had a problem with electricity. And if you know, today and these days, the president of Ukraine reported that as a result of the Russians' attacks in the 10th of October, the Russians destroyed around 30% of Ukrainian energy energy facilities in Ukraine. If we're talking about Kharkiv, the Russians attacked some plants, some industrial zone in this area. As far as I understand, this is the area where the Ukrainians, there's an airport in this area, so the Russians destroyed some airport where the Ukrainians hangars, where the Ukrainians were keeping some armored vehicles, maybe drones, and maybe they used this area to fix and repair drones in this area. Another important update are coming from Zaporozhye, because the Russians attacked Zaporozhye as well. During these days, Zaporozhye and Dnipro and this town, and if we take a look at Dnipro, you're going to see that the Russians destroyed very powerful power plant on the Dnipro River. So as you can see, the Russians are totally concentrated on the energy facility of Ukraine. And if we take a look at Nikolaev, there was another attack, and as you can see, the Russians destroyed, as far as I see, 110 kilovolts energy facility in this area. Furthermore, today the Russians reported that they attacked Odessa region, and as a result of that attack, they destroyed space communication station, this one in this area. I'm not sure what is this station responsible for, but I believe that this is a very big loss for the Ukrainians, for their communication, for their forces, that they're using the internet and so on. So I believe that it's not a very good update for the Ukrainians. If we're talking about the front lines are stable, just with one update. If we're talking about Kherson and the north of LPR region, today the Russians Ministry of Defense reported that the Russians got control over the town by the name of Gorobovka, this one. And this is a very interesting update, because if you take a look at the Western sources map, you're gonna see that there is one important difference between these two maps, and according to the Western sources map, all this area is under Ukrainian control. This area is not even in the gray zone. But if we take a look at the Russian sources map, we are watching at the same area. This area is under the Russians, and furthermore, the Russians got control over this town, Gorobovka. And this is a very important update, because if you remember, during the previous 2-3 weeks, we reported that Ukrainians were trying to cross the river. It's a Oskol River, by the way, this Oskol River, and the Ukrainians got control over Dvorichna during the Kharkiv counteroffensive operation. And during these days, the Ukrainians were trying to cross Oskol, sending 14th Mechanized Brigade and 92nd Mechanized Brigade, and they were trying to develop their bridgehead in this area, and the most important target for these forces was to take town by the name of Tavlazhanka, this one. But all Ukraine's attempts were defeated, were failed, and the Russians were very successful in this area, and as a result of those clashes on this bridgehead, today the Russians reported they returned control over Gorobovka. This town is very important because nobody knows if whether the Ukrainians are planning to start counteroffensive operation in the direction of Svatova, or they're not planning to do this. Maybe the Ukrainians decided to defend this area, who knows. But anyway, now we understand that the Ukrainians lost connection between Dvorechye and Kupiansk. Let's take a look at this map. As you can see, this bridgehead used to be connected, and this town was under Ukrainian control, and the Ukrainians have had a very nice connection between these two areas. And if we take a look at the western source map, you're gonna see that if the Ukrainians they had this railroad, and if the Ukrainians were able to keep this position, I believe that in months they would be able to restore the railroad and to move some forces in this area, so to optimize their logistic. But for now, we can say that Ukrainians lost this bridgehead, because now they still have control over Dvorichne and Gryanivka, these two towns, but they don't have connections with the, we can say, mainland or the Kupiansk from the south. And also, it's not a very good idea to cross this river, because we saw and heard a lot of reports from the Russians that they're attacking the bridge, the pontoon bridges in this area heavily, and that the Ukrainians have had and still have a lot of losses during the crossing process. And another important update about this territory, we understand that, let's update this map according to this information. So according to the Russian sources, the Russians now control something like this in this area. And the thing is, if Ukrainians decide to attack Svatova, this area, now we understand that they need to protect and defend their flanks. Because I believe that as soon as the Ukrainians started their counteroffensive operation in direction of Svatova, the Russians are able to attack the Ukrainians along the river and from the north. And of course to attack the Ukrainians in their flanks. So the situation is not very good for the Ukrainians. I believe maybe they stopped any movements in direction of Svatova just because of that. Because they lost their position on the north, and they see that the Russians are moving more and more reinforcements to this area. And now I believe that maybe by the end of this year, the Ukrainians will be forced to leave this area, to leave the bridgehead between Oskol and Zherebets River, because if we're talking about this bridgehead, it's their weakest position on the front line. It is very difficult to move reinforcements to this area, because there is no bridges, there is no railroad in this area, and the only one way how they can move their forces is using pontoon bridges. But all those pontoon bridges, I believe that is under total fire Russian control. So I believe that Ukrainians will be forced to leave this area just because of logistic problems. And if they move their forces on that side of Oskol River, they have all possibilities to be on the safe side. And I believe that the Russians won't try to cross Oskol and Seversky Donetsk River at least until May or June of the next year. For now, they will stay there, and I believe that maybe the Russians, because of that, will be able to return control over Liman even in this year. And if we're talking about the losses and so on, the Russians reported that as a result of their attacks against the 14th and 92nd Mechanized Brigade in this area in the Kupiansk bridgehead, the Ukrainians lost around 160 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. If we're talking about Lysychansk, the Ukrainians, if we're talking about Liman, there were some clashes around Liman as well. The Ukrainians were trying to make some recon combat in this area, trying to understand the situation on the front line, and of course it's like the regular situation as we saw yesterday, the day before. And as a result of those attacks, the Ukrainians lost around 46 soldiers and 10 armored vehicles. If we're talking about the front line between Bilogorka, Serebyanka, Seversk and till Donetsk, there are no changes. As you can see, Donetsk is still under very heavy fire. Today we got some reports about wounded and killed civilians in this town, but there are no changes as well. And if we are talking about Kherson district, the same picture. The Ukrainians are trying to understand the situation, trying to push, trying to do some recon combats, and for now their main goal to take control over Bruskinskaya. And the Russians reported that as a result of all those clashes and Ukrainians' attempts to establish control over some towns or villages along the front line, cost them around 90 soldiers and something around 30 armored vehicles, including tanks, including trucks, including cars and buses and so on. But the front line is stable. Very important updates are coming from Kherson, from this town. The Russians reported that they adopted some laws in this for this region, and according to these laws, anybody who lives in Kherson are able to receive apartments, flats, house, land on all over the entire Russian Federation. Anywhere you want, you can get apartments, you can get house, you can get land, you can get everything you want if you decide to leave Kherson. And this is very important update because if you remember, we talked about the fact that the Russians reported and announced about evacuation of civilians in this town. Now they have adopted some laws that allows these people to receive apartments all over the Russian Federation for free. You don't need to pay, you just need to evacuate from this town. And today we got some updates, some intelligence information from United Kingdom. They reported that the Russians took a decision to create a real fortress from Kherson. And for these reasons they decided to evacuate people from Kherson, from this town. And the British intelligence reported that the Russians are planning to accumulate in Kherson, in this fortress, in this area, around 100,000/150,000 of soldiers. And this is the reason why the Western countries requested the Ukrainians to start offensive operation before the end of this year, because this is the only window that Ukrainians have to achieve any success and maybe to break the situation and to return control over Kherson. Because after that, the Russians will move a lot of reinforcement, a lot of trained, mobilized forces, and they will prepare the powerful attack phase for one purpose: to take control over Nikolaev, to take control over Odessa, and to establish the bridge between Transnistria and the south of Russian Federation. The British intelligence reported that the Russians still plans to do this and that they will try to complete this task in the next year. So for now, the Ukrainians need to do anything they can but to destroy Kherson. And if we're talking about the soldiers from the Ukrainian side, from Kherson district, we got also, according to the Russian sources, of course, they reported that if we're talking about the foreigners, about the volunteers, they refused to start any offensive operation in this area because of heavy losses on the open fields. And if we're talking about the regular soldiers, about Ukrainian soldiers, they also refuse to attack and to start any counter-offensive operation because they understand that this might be just a suicide operation. And even if the Ukrainians are able to achieve any success in Kherson, this operation will cost them thousands, maybe dozens of thousands of soldiers of their lives. And we understand that nobody wants to die. We understand that. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.